Poke the Bear is brought to you by PrizePicks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 342, presented by PrizePicks. Again, if you guys have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you have plenty of daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins View with Devin Marinofsky, Pucks with Hags. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins offseason going into the 2025-26 season. So please follow along with us over at YouTube. If you don't like YouTube, you don't want to see my ugly face, I get it. You can also subscribe and follow us over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your hockey podcasts. The show is also brought to you by PrizePicks, North America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download today and use code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we're joined by the esteemed, the ever-knowledgeable, the BC super fan, Ty Anderson, 95. What's up, Ty? How you doing?
I am a BC super fan in the sense that I love when BU and BC play each other because guess what, guys? I went to community college. I don't really care who wins, but I do love seeing you agonize and the other beat reporters who cover the Boston Bruins agonize over BU losing or struggling or anything like that. I'm a chaos agent mainly, so I like seeing people just absolutely in misery over sports. So I'm a BC super fan in that regard, I guess. That's true. Now I have to follow BC, whether I like it or not. And so do you, pal. You got to watch BC every game this year.
I got to go to Connie Forum, got to, grab my bags, make the long trek all the way outside of Boston over to, Newton or whatever they want to call it, Chestnut Hill. It's not in Boston. Got to go all the way there, find a hotel to spend the night, to go to that crappy rink over at Conti Forum. What a pain in the ass. All things considered, even if, I take joy out of seeing the BC Eagles all the way out in Newton come up short, you're right. There's going to be a lot of Bruins prospects over on that squad next year, headlined by James Hagens, who, I don't know about you, Ty. I think we've mentioned this before on the podcast. Stock dropped a little bit this year, but I think when we talked about the reservations of a player like that, that was back when I think we thought the Bruins had a good chance of maybe winning the lottery, finishing second. Something like that. Maybe, hey, even if they finish fifth overall and maybe you're in the running for like a Frundell or someone like that, which ended up not being the case. But all right, is Hagens, there are a few maybe concerns about him. At number 7 overall, like that has to be the best case scenario for the Bruins in terms of just how the board fell in front of them and who is there to take. And whatever you want to say about him, getting Hagens at number 7 for a team that their floor and their ceiling for whatever their next, core is, whatever their next chapter of contention is going to be. It's only so high if you don't have an elite center down the middle. And on paper, looking at the tape, that's what James Hagens is and what he could be at the NHL level.
Yeah, 100%. And I believe personally that the things that he has to work on, some of them you can't fix. Like he's going to be 5'10", 5'11", barring something unforeseen here, he's going to be that kind of size, kind of centerman. But the things that, kind of cropped up or popped up as things that, might have scared you off a little bit, defensive awareness, defensive, willingness, perhaps, those can be fixed, right? What you can't teach a guy to have is talent and puck senses and that natural kind of speed and the ability to make plays and to be a quick thinker while maintaining your speed. Like that's something that you either have or you don't, right? Like guys don't suddenly just become speed demons and process the game faster, at 24, 25 years old. Yeah, it could get easier, but there's a natural kind of puck sense and puck ability there. The hands that you can't teach, right? And so you like it from that standpoint. And as we said on this podcast, like I didn't love him at number 1. I was iffy at number 3. Number 7, tremendous value. That's great value. And I think why we said that is because you looked at who was available, right? Or who could be available 1 through 3. Michael Misa and Anton Frundell, like those guys went where we thought they would go, right. And the board did break a little bit, perhaps uniquely along the way. I didn't have Caleb Denoyer at 4. Brady Martin at 5 seems a little high. I thought maybe 6, maybe 7 if he were there for the Bruins, and some of these guys we're talking about were off the board. But at 7, that's tremendous value. You know, I was talking with some talent evaluators yesterday after the draft and on Friday night after the draft, and kind of saying, like, what do you think? And pretty much universal, Hagens at 7 is great for the Bruins. That's what I was told by multiple people outside of the organization, outside of any affiliation to the Boston Bruins or allegiance to the Boston Bruins, basically saying, like, this kid falling to them at 7 is great for the Bruins, and it's also probably great for Hagens. That was the other part of it they mentioned, that it's probably good for him to not have the pressure of being the number 1 pick or having a bit of a chip on his shoulder being the 6th forward drafted in this draft. Like, that might be the best thing that can happen to him, because now he's like, you know what? I'm going to show you all why I should have been the first forward off the board.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, when you look at the reasons for his slide, right? And I agree that not the biggest body, and you do wonder how much that is going to, you know, how much his skill set will translate to the next level if he is getting boxed. I will say, like, he's 5'11". I think he's maybe 5'10" and a half, probably is the best way to put him, but he's already at 190, he says. So he's like he's a pretty stocky dude for that size. Like, he doesn't really look like when you see him in person, but he's a guy who I think if he plays to his strengths can still be effective in terms of playing the game his way, dictating, you know, the way he wants to play, as opposed to him being limited, I would probably say, if the skill translates over. But then the rest of it, I think a lot of it goes back to his production this past year. And I don't know if it's just the unreasonable expectations or what, but, like, he was an effective player. I mean, if you're a 17-year-old going on 18, I think he turned 18 in November of his freshman year, but to go in Hockey East and be a point per game player is pretty impressive. Like, you don't really see that all that often, right? Where a player is able to do that. I think probably when you look at the fact that, you know, he was probably the consensus number 1 pick, not just like going into the fall, but probably like the year before that. And you look at the numbers he put up, you can see why. I mean, he's got 102 points in under 60 games with the U.S. National Development Program, which I think matches Patrick Kane's scoring totals there. You look at the U18 tournament, he had 22 points in 9 games, which was a tournament record, surpassing guys like Gavin McKenna and Nikita Kucherov. So he's ripped it up everywhere he's gone. So I could see that. I think once you've seen, especially over the last decade, all these generational top-ranked freshmen who go to Hockey East and dominate, right? Like Eichel, or even not Hockey East, but Adam Fantilli, Macklin Celebrini. It's almost like I think he needed to probably have a 2-point per game type of season, like a 60-point year, to validate that hype. And when he's only a point per game guy, I think you start looking probably as an evaluator of like, whoa, what's going on here? And then you dive more into it. And it's like, well, all right, well, he's deferring, I guess, a little bit more. And you know what? Like, he is only 5'11". Like, what actually do we have here? And I feel like that's kind of the snowball effect as to why he's dropped a little bit. But to what you said earlier, him going back this year with a chip on his shoulder, barring injury or anything else, I fully expect him to be like a 55, 60-point guy, probably be a Hobie Baker finalist, and really dominate his second year. Because I don't think he was outmatched in Hockey East. It's just some guys, it clicks like that, and some guys need a little bit of time. But I know it's a defenseman, but like, look at like Cale Makar. His was a top 5 pick, had a really good freshman year by, I think, everyone's standards, and then came back, kind of had the answers to the test a little bit, and then dominated. Like, I could see something similar like that. Not saying he's going to be the next generational guy as to what Makar did to the defenseman position, but I fully expect him to really dominate this upcoming year at BC.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to phrase it, right? Like, and I think the Bruins internally look at it that way as well, where they say, okay, maybe we didn't notice you as much as we would like to, right? He wasn't Macklin Celebrini. But if that's the bar, it's a pretty damn high bar to set for any 18-year-old freshman coming into that league. And so I think that's what you're looking for, right? Like, you're like, because I said that as well, like when my limited viewings of BC in 24, 25, and I have to defer to people who watch the players more, because you and I were covering 82 games of an NHL season. It is hard. I think especially you're married. I have a girlfriend. You know, it's hard to be like, hey, Bruins aren't playing tonight, but I really want to stay inside.
Let's go to Newton.
Yeah, Let's go to Newton and watch BC. So like I haven't seen a ton of him, but I remember in my limited viewings of him, I kind of went, okay. Like, and I think that's kind of that's like to your point, that's the problem is like you're not seeing the takeover. Okay, but am I not seeing the takeover because he's not good, or am I not seeing the takeover because he's playing with Ryan Leonard, who was the best player in the country in my opinion, and Gabe Perreault, who we saw with the Rangers at the end of the year? Like, can I hold that against him for deferring to his superstar line mates? It's kind of like, listen, I never shit on David Pastrnak when he was a young gun running with Bergeron and Marchand because he was a young gun and he's deferring to his veteran line mates, so there is that element there. But I think for the Bruins, you look at it and you go, okay, now, Leonard's in Washington, Perreault's in New York. This is your team, buddy. Go out and dominate. And if you have that, I think that erases a lot of doubts that you may have about this pick here on June 29th. Is that, okay, I don't know if he can do this. I don't know if he can do that. Okay, well, let's see if he can dominate, right? If he can be more of, let's say he was a point per game guy a year ago. Let's say he's like 1.25 points per game, 1.3 points per game. You feel a lot better, right? About the player and how he can be. But yeah, as you noted, and as the Bruins have noted, and people I've talked to have noted, like, he's a true freshman, right? Like he is a young player and he does well against his age group. And that is what is most important with these prospects. And with a prospect like James Hagens, it's just unusual for the Boston Bruins, right? Because this is a franchise that has been so talent starved, right? That you see a young prospect and your mind immediately goes to, okay, well, how soon can he help us? Right. And it's like, okay, well, take your time. You're not that team right now. Like, you got a real blue chip guy here. Patience is not a bad thing with a prospect. This is how actual teams that have success roll out their prospects.
And I think also to that point, like, I agree that I think there has to be patience for him. Like, he should absolutely go back to BC this upcoming year and, like, again, get that confidence, dominate, which I think everyone expects. But he's also a guy that if all goes right, he could be up here in March, right? Like, and again, is he going to be, ending the year with 8 points in 10 games? No. But like, even like Ryan Leonard didn't really take over once he got there, but you feel a lot better as a fan that's looking for that next wave when all of a sudden Hagens is up here in the springtime and, he's going to be a factor going into 2026-27, right? Like, it's almost like you're able to get a guy at number 7 who has that, that top pedigree of being like a blue chip elite talent for years now. And with the fact that he's also not really a project, right? Like, it's not like a McQueen or a Brady Martin, even, where like Brady Martin, I feel like, is a guy that we know is going to be a pro, but like, we don't even know what his ceiling is. Like, Hagens could be a point per game guy, and like, maybe he's not, maybe he's still more of just like a 60-point highly skilled player, but you've got a good player, right? And a guy that I think you can project that he's going to be in the NHL when you see his hands, the skating ability, his playmaking, all those things. And to like what you said earlier about the way that, Hagens, how he projects and like the consensus on him. I saw a few people compare it, and it's probably not the apt comparison because like the comparable is going to get out of whack and it's going to put a lot of unfair expectation on Hagens, but it's almost kind of like with Tatum, how he dropped to like 3. And I'm not saying he's going to be the top 5 player in the league, like how Tatum was, but it's almost like Tatum was so hyped going into Duke and was really good. And that's all he kind of was. And then people were like, all right, well, maybe he's just going to be like a 20-7 guy in the NBA. Like, he can drop a little bit. And then you saw him right away. You're like, oh shit. Oh man. Where it's like, you look at Hagens, it's like, oh, we think this guy's going to be the next Eichel. Oh, he's just really good. Okay, well, he's 5'11", so we can let him drop, and maybe he'll be, a Logan Cooley or someone like that. And then, like, if he goes to BC this upcoming year and then is a 50-point guy, like if he has a hat trick against Michigan State in their first game, I feel like a lot of people that drafted before the Bruins are like, whoops. And I feel like that could change like that pretty quickly, where I think whether it's the expectations going into the year or fatigue of having his name at the top of the list all the time, I feel like it's not going to take much to have a lot of teams being like, I can't believe he's going to drop to 7. Because, again, you look at his body of work, and again, I don't even think the Bruins view this past year as an outlier for it being only a point per game guy, but I don't see a lot of red flags off of just what this past year was, especially when you look at the wider scale of what he's done for the last 3, 4, 5 years leading up to it. I mean, if he was in the OHL, like with Michael Misa, he'd have like 125 point season.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
He's racked up points everywhere he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was sort of the thing that, I was texting with somebody who is a talent evaluator, and they did say the Bruins needed this pick because they need skill in their pipeline. He said, but even for the teams that have skill and passed on him, we're going to look back in 2 years and go, how did this guy drop to 7? Like, that's kind of how they look at it. And they said, like, this is not to knock the other players that were drafted ahead of him because they were really good. They're like, but he's such a high ceiling player that if that ceiling, if he reaches that ceiling, we're going to go, how did he fall to 7? Like, that's, and that's kind of that's the best compliment you can give a guy who has had production and fell to 7, right? Like, it's not like you're saying this about a 100th overall pick, because every scout, every team, every, player personnel guy has that kind of player, right? That is like the 4th round pick. And they're like, I love this guy. And that guy has, 10 goals and 80 AHL games. Like, oh, you loved him, but he ain't that good. Like, I think this is different, right? This is a guy who has production, but the production, to our points, has been scrutinized, perhaps almost too heavily, over the last year plus, because when it is a consensus number 1 pick, you are looking for flaws. You are looking for holes in their game. And I'm not going to tell you he doesn't have any. He does have some. He has some stuff he has to work on, as we've talked about. But the overall ceiling is higher than anything you have in your pipeline, which is a good thing and a bad thing all in one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say, when you look at the rest of what the Bruins did in the draft, it does feel like they are opting for more of high ceiling, high skill type of players. We will talk about the rest of their draft class. Before we do that, take a quick break here from our friends over at PrizePicks. Hoop season might be over, but baseball season is still in full swing, which means you can still run your game with PrizePicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Think Shohei will get more than 3 hits? Maybe Garrett Crochet for more than 7 strikeouts, and maybe Red Sox can score a run for him here and there, but I digress. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this baseball season when you and your friends run your game on PrizePicks. PrizePicks also has a ton of promos, including Flex Friday. Make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in the lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. Choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup does not win, you get your net losses back in promo funds up to your promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. And it's not just baseball. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite baseball players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and much more. There's really no shortage of ways to participate in PrizePicks. This week, I'm looking at the board, and I'm going to cover all my bases. I've got Roman Anthony for more than 1 home run and Mookie Betts for more than 3 extra base hits. It's really that easy. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 back after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the PrizePicks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at PrizePicks. Ty, look at the rest of what the Bruins did at the NHL draft. A lot of excitement over James Hagens obviously being there at number 7, but you look at the rest of who they picked up. They got Will Moore in the 2nd round, a guy that was predicted to be like potentially a late 1st round pick, going in the 30s, maybe in the 2nd round, but a 2-way center, also going to BC, of course. But then you also look at the fact that they're bringing in, maybe more project guys like, Pedersen, the defenseman. Also, I would like to digress because we usually wait for actual breaking news to happen, but the Bruins just signed Marat Khusnutdinov, 2-year deal, $925,000 per year, and Michael Callahan, 1-year deal, 2-way deal, 1-year deal, 2-way contract for $775,000. So not necessarily surprising there.
Yeah, I think Callahan could be your 7th D next year. I think you might want to aim a little bit higher than that in terms of 7th D, but like Callahan is probably your Parker Wotherspoon replacement. I imagine Wotherspoon is going to get paid more than the Bruins want to pay him. And even that is going to be like $975, maybe $1 million, but I feel like Wotherspoon kind of really acquitted himself as a capable depth option that, it's doesn't make a lot of sense to overpay for those kind of guys, because that's how you really get in trouble, even with the rising cap, is if you're paying guys $1 million to sit in the press box 45 times a year.
Yeah, exactly. So doing a little bit of housekeeping for the Bruins before obviously later on this week with free agency. So I'm sure there'll be more news to drop today as well. But looking back at the draft, though, you're able to get some high value guys, some guys that I think you can view as projects, maybe reaches, right? Where you look at Liam Pettersson, puck moving defenseman in the second round. I think everyone's favorite pick, Vasek Blanar, round 4, who did not have an elite prospects page for a second there. We had to find out what his actual name was. Wasn't ranked a lot. 6'4", playmaking defenseman. In the very few scouting reports I have of him, said he's a really good skater, offensive-minded type of player. So it does seem like when you look at this whole draft class, the Bruins seem to be prioritizing a little bit maybe more risk, but risk in terms of getting high upside players as opposed to like the risk of like settling for bottom 6 grit physicality. It's like I feel like probably from their perspective, it's like they'd rather flame out if a guy doesn't project, to hit his ceiling as like a legit top 4 type player or a top 6 player, as opposed to, well, like if he doesn't work out, he can still be a 3rd line, 4th line guy. And it's like I feel like they want to take a little bit more swings here with this draft class.
Yeah, I think with William Moore, I keep calling him Oliver because Oliver Moore is the prospect that the Bruins were interested in back in 2023. And they didn't have a first round pick to get him. William Moore, this is a guy who, is really intriguing, right? Like there are people who believe that he was picked appropriately. And there are some that I've talked to that think he should have gone a lot higher, perhaps even challenged for a first round kind of pick, maybe, 29, 30 around that area. They like his game a lot. He was really good for the US U18 team this past season, had a cup of coffee in the USHL, 21 points in 25 games, nothing to sneeze at, as a younger player. And now he's going to Boston College, and Sweeney talked about it yesterday that he's not worried about him, jumping to the college game after just 25 USHL games. And so I kind of dug around on that one. I kind of asked people that have seen him, and I'm like, do you agree with that? And they said, yeah. They said different kind of player than Dean Letourneau, different kind of body type, different kind of pace and energy, a style that will translate quicker to the college game, than a typical project, so to speak. And so that alone is good. If you're getting a guy in the second round who, is kind of jumping to the NCAA and on a good program that soon, kind of tells you what you like about him and what he can be. And so, these guys are 3-4 years away once we get beyond, James Hagens, but that's good value, according to the people I've talked with. And again, people have seen him more than I've seen him this past year. And so, yeah, it's exciting, but I think the thing that kind of kept coming back to me when I was talking to people about William Moore, good prospect to put behind Hagens. Like that's kind of what they said. Like if you're going to draft a guy like Hagens, having a guy like William Moore behind him is a good call. So it's kind of like the yin and the yang, right? You get the high offensive guy and you get the guy who's steady Eddie, right? You know what he's going to bring you every night. Like that's, that part of it is you can see the calculus sort of, in motion for the Boston Bruins right there when you bring in a guy like that right after James Hagens.
Yeah. And I think you look at the rest of the guys they targeted, right? Whether it's the 2 project playmaking defensemen who are pretty raw and are going to need some time, or even like Colton Simpson, right? Who had 49 goals in 31 games with at the high school level in Minnesota. Who
Shakopee.
Yeah, who could be like essentially is like the next Will Zellers, essentially, right? Where it's like guy who I imagine they probably want to go to the USHL for a year, and if he likes it up there, he goes to North Dakota and gives the Bruins another scoring wing potential next to a player like Zellers. But I think it all kind of harkens back, and I think you asked Ryan Nadeau this about what they were focusing on or how things changed this, going to this draft. And he pretty much talked about the fact that they were able to take some more swings on higher upside players. And, it's a little bit different from in years past. And I think for them probably, and it's also something that Sweeney mentioned of like the scouting department probably gets excited when they sell off some guys and have these draft picks where they can be more aggressive or creative or have more leeway to target these types of players that I think after years of having either, no draft picks at all or stagnant production or anything like that, it's like this felt like the year where they're like, hey, let's lean into the upside. Like there's a pretty good chance that Vasek Blanar doesn't hit and isn't like an impactful player. But what if he is a 6'4" physical puck moving defenseman there? You know how many guys would love to have a player like that? Let's see what we got in this guy. If no one else knows who he is, we saw him over in the Swedish Junior Leagues and he was kicking an ass over there. We know how much the Bruins invest heavily in the scouting over in Sweden. So I'm not saying that every pick's going to be perfect. As soon as I couldn't find his name on Elite Prospects, I was like, oh, but it does feel like their overall strategy beyond just getting a hyper skilled player in Hagens is just leaning more into that high upside and see what you have here. Because if even one or two of those guys hits, it changes the complexion of the whole prospect pool. You got Hagens, but let's say Dean Letourneau has an 18-point season at BC. Not perfect, but that changes the complexion as well. And I think you're just trying to find different ways to add more of that talent beyond just Hagens in the pipeline.
100. Yeah, I mean, completely. And that's sort of, I think, where this organization is right now. And yeah, like, you look at it's kind of an admission too, like from Ryan Nadeau to myself, like things we've talked about on this podcast, that for too long with their draft picks, they were aiming for what is the safest, right? And you understand the theory behind that because you had a core in place. You had Torrey Krug, you had Zdeno Chara, you had Marchand, you had Bergeron, you had Krejci. You had all these guys that you looked at and said, okay, well, we got scoring, we got power play quarterbacks. We got this, we got that. But you need all those things now, right? Like what's the foundation of your franchise right now? It's David Pastrnak, and you hope it's Charlie McAvoy and Jeremy Swayman and Hampus Lindholm, and but you really need more game-changing, watch them on the ice every kind of night kind of players, and they haven't drafted enough of those players. And so to go out and to do that, to get those players, that's big, or players you hope can fill that. Like I will never knock a team for swinging for the fences with the draft pick. I think it's what you should do with the draft pick. What is the point of drafting an intentionally lower floor, just so you can say, oh, they've played games played? Well, guess what, Cam? We saw that. We saw how that played out at the press conference with you and Kevin Paul DuPont arguing about, how many NHL games played your draft picks have played. Okay, well, are they good players or are they the fourth line center or right, the seventh D on the New York Rangers? Like, what does that matter how many games they played if they're not impactful players? Anyone could do that. Vern Fiddler played almost 1,000 games in the NHL and he wasn't drafted. Like what does it matter if it's games played? And so I think to do that, like that's it's both a positive development and it's also a frustrating admission that they were taking lower ceilings because of a safer floor, right? And that's like, I hate that, right? And I think if you're a Bruins fan, that's like, if you're a Bruins fan, you like them admitting it now, but you're also looking at it going, if we did this a little bit sooner, maybe we're in a better spot right now, right? And we're not playing catch up, but better late than never, as always. But it is an admission, though, that they were, for a long time there, they were admittedly taking role players with first and second round picks, which has not worked out. It just has not worked out the way they envisioned it working out when they made those picks.
Yeah, so at least frustrating to say the least, but also we'll see if they're able to hopefully bank on some more upside here. All those guys, for now at least, seem to be scheduled to take part in Dev Camp this week, which we will be at. Is there any other player beyond the guys that, the Hagens that are in this Dev Camp roster that you're keeping an eye out for this week?
Yeah, so they might have a couple of invites coming as well. I'm trying to get some names on those as we're recording right now. But Cole Chandler is the guy that intrigues me. 5th round pick, 133rd overall. Had modest point totals, I would say, for Shawinigan in the Q this past year, 32 points in 63 or 4 games. I can't remember exactly. But a really strong playoff to end his year. 3rd round series against Rimouski Oceanic. I'll just call him Oceanic because I have no idea how to say that first one.
Yeah, but can't help you there.
Best team in the Q, Oceanic was this past year. And his team Chandler's team were fighting for their lives against them. And the final 3 games of that series, Chandler had 2 goals and 2 assists, including the goal that kickstarted it was a failed comeback, but a comeback nonetheless. They were down 3-0 in game 7, and he scores the first goal. They end up tying it up. They go to double overtime. They lose, but again, a player who got better as the series went along, and to 12 points in 16 playoff games, he goes down swinging. I think you need some of those players that when the moment is bigger, they show up and they play their best game. And so an intriguing pick, a 5th round pick, it's always a flyer. If you get 80 NHL games out of them, you're happy. But that's a player that I want to see us compete. I want to see, what kind of intensity he brings to the ice. Because if he's one of those guys, like, those guys can carve out a role for themselves pretty nicely in this league, as we've seen year in and year out.
Yeah. And, there should be a lot of, I think, especially guys that over the last couple of drafts will be interesting to see how they've developed. Like, I think Chris Pelosi is a guy that had a pretty good year for Quinnipiac, see what he could do. Obviously, I think a lot of people are going to see how Dean Letourneau looks, because that's still a guy who, honestly, talking about a guy who's got the pressure lifted off of him now, where it's almost like if he's able to bounce back next year at BC and just be, to what you said, like 18-point guy as a sophomore. Like, he's going to be a 4-year project anyway, but it's almost like now you're operating with like found money if like he ends up just being an NHL player, because also he's not, what I think maybe the expectations were after they drafted him, like, well, this guy could be Tage Thompson. No, like don't do that. That's unfair to him. But also it's like if he's just a 6'7" 3C down the road, you'd be like, okay, like that's fine because we got James Hagens here. Like, it almost alleviates some of that pressure once you have guys like him and Will Moore in the pipeline as well. One guy I definitely want to see, Will Zellers, a guy who's feels like in terms of just the immediate returns, gives you a lot of hope off of that sell-off, right? Where he's a guy that I feel like we didn't immediately know who he was. And you see all like the Avalanche prospect. It's like you have Richie who went in the Brock Nesselton trade. And after that, it's like Will Zellers, you're like trying to figure out his stats. Was USHL player of the year, forward of the year for them, 44 goals in 52 games, really impactful player going to North Dakota. And for a Bruins team that is so desperate to have, internal talent coming up through the system, especially goal scoring talent, I really want to see what he can do this upcoming year and see how he can kind of jumpstart that. Because again, you've got Hagens, but if all of a sudden like Zellers goes to North Dakota and is a 25 goal scorer there, feel good about where you're going. Like, the prospect pool is getting deeper, and I think that would be really encouraging for this team.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a knock on these players at all, but when you're asking your fan base every year to get really jazzed about, Riley Duran and Andre Gasso, like, you're kind of asking a lot out of them. And this is not a knock on them. I hope both of them are impact players, and I like the body of work you've seen from both players, but you got to give your fans something that is higher than, well, we hope he can be a 3rd-line contributor or a 4th-line stalwart. Like, you need something higher than that, right? And so I think you're getting there, right? And this is an unpopular opinion. I completely understand it when I say it. If you don't like Don Sweeney's body of work the last 3 months, it's because you don't like the guy. And that's okay. Like, I'm not telling you should like him or you should love him. Like, he's got his flaws. But how he's handled the last 3.5 months has been, I think, really good GMing, right? Like, you move Coyle and you get Will Zellers in a 2nd-round pick, right? And the Avalanche have already moved on from Charlie Coyle. So you won that trade, like that's a trade for you that you have won. And so I like that. I like adding, and listen, they got some stuff to solve now between Brandon Carlo being gone and needing a right shot D, but the 1st-round pick is more valuable to you than Brandon Carlo is going to be. You know what I mean? Like, for where you are right now as a franchise. And so with that in mind, like, I think they've done good work, right? And now you got to build on it, right? This is the hard part. You can have a good few months, but okay, what are we building towards? What's the end goal here? And that's the part for the Bruins that we got to see between now and, when the puck drops on 25, 26, because they got a lot of work to do still. It's just, right now, last 3 months, I think the Bruins have done actually a pretty good job.
Yeah, it does feel like, again, we'll see what kind of comes out of free agency and any other moves to put this team more on the right track. But it does feel like since March, after you raised that white flag, like they're in a better spot, right? They're moving in the right direction. You've got a blue chip talent in Hagens. You got some money available now with, key guys signed long term, like the Pasternaks, the McAvoys, the Swaymans, before the cap jumps up for it seems like the next 3-4 years at this point. You've got guys in the system now, not just Hagens, but Zellers and even more, some of these other types of players who could be high upside players. So I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. Not saying this team's back in the mix next year or anything, but it does feel like they are slowly inching their way back to where they should be in terms of being a sustainable contender. And I think it's a couple of years away, but they're making the right moves for now, I would say, is what they're doing. And then
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, like this is probably, I've been covering this team since 2015. I mean, Jesus, 2010. So 15 years. You've been on the beat for like 7 or 8 years now. This is probably the most positive that I think people have felt externally about their pipeline since I've started covering the team. I would say maybe 2011, when you have Sagan and you have Hamilton back to back, it's like, okay, feeling good. Then those things don't work out, as we all know. But this is definitely this is probably the most external optimism that I have heard and felt from people, again, not affiliated with the Bruins in any fashion, about what Don Sweeney has done since he took over 10 years ago. And that I think is, it doesn't matter to the fan. I understand that, but that's what's, I think, is important, right? People that have no biases, no allegiances to the Bruins, be it positive or negative, are saying, hey, that's a good draft for them. That's, I can't remember when that's ever happened here under Don Sweeney. Even in 2015, when they had all those picks, I was talking to somebody who I've known for a long time, has been scouting for 20, 30 years. And they were like, yeah, it's okay. And I was like, really? They were like, yeah, they're like, I don't know, they could be good, but this is no, they got some players, and I think that's what's most important right now for the Boston Bruins fan is you finally have legit reasons to be optimistic about where this pipeline could go, given the ceiling on those players drafted.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, we'll see how they are able to build off of that now going into free agency. Does feel like the options are dwindling already. I feel like Mitch Marner might be posted up at the Bellagio in a couple of days. You hate to see. Oh, actually, not hate to see, but it's good to see one of these scrappy teams like Vegas finally get a win. It's doesn't happen all that often for that team, but I feel like they're getting a great talent there in Mitch Marner. So that feels like it's going to be off the table. Dante Fabro, who is a guy that a lot of people have mentioned as a possible fit for the Bruins at right shot D, which is a sneaky huge vacancy for this team this year. People just look at the scoring talent, but that is also a critical need. He's re-signing with Columbus off of a pretty good deal, 4 years, 4.125. I know he kind of has been a up and down player, but looked really good down the stretch for Columbus there. So that's a good deal for him. Bruins have the cap space. They got the money to make a couple of moves beyond the in-house stuff like Morgan Geeky's contract. Ty, how do you think they approach free agency, and how successful do you think they're going to be in terms of bringing in some talent?
First of all, what a good find by the Blue Jackets, claiming Fabro off waivers and then re-signing him. Really great stabilizing presence back there for that team, and a sneaky good goal scorer too for a guy who doesn't play a ton, on the power play behind Zach Werenski. Anyways, nevertheless, I do go back to right shot D, and you mentioned Fabro, he's off the board. It is a really intriguing market. You have Aaron Ekblad, and then you have Brent Burns and Nick Perbix, and then you're kind of in that Tony D'Angelo territory of okay, who you bringing in, right? And so really intriguing. I feel like that option may present itself on the trade market. We've heard a bit about Rasmus Andersson out in Calgary. That would be that's a first round pick in Matty Poitras and somebody else kind of trade, in my opinion, if you're going to make that. If you're the Boston Bruins, but it's going to be intriguing. I don't know if the free agent market has what they need, on that back end. I have my doubts there. I know Sweeney admitted that they are still talking with Henry Jokiharju's camp. I would probably aim higher than that if I were the Boston Bruins. Not a knock on Jokiharju, who did have some good moments there playing with Nikita Zadorov, but can you get 82 games worth of good moments out of him in that spot if you want to be a playoff team? Not sure. I'm not 100% sold on that. And so that's a big need, and a need that if I had one critique about their draft, it's that they didn't get a right shot D and also goaltending. They didn't draft a goalie either. And perhaps that speaks to their belief in Jeremy Swayman, but at the same time, like, you don't really have a lot of amateur pipeline goalies in your system right now. And so a little surprised they didn't make that kind of move there. I thought it surely would happen in round 2 or round 3. We'll see what the free agent market provides, but it's really hard, man, to see what they're going to do, because I don't think they're going to get Marner, clearly, as you mentioned. I don't think they're going to win the Nikolai Ehlers sweepstakes. So is it Brock Besser or bust? Okay, well, that's a bidding war. I don't know if I love that either. It's a really intriguing offseason for them in that regard. And I just wonder if the trade market might be better for them than the free agent market. Sweeney kind of couched it a little bit.
He's kind of mentioned trades quite a bit the last couple of days. Don't forget about the trades, guys. Are you giving us a spoiler alert, or?
He kind of said it, but then couched it and then brought it back the next day, where he was like, me, I'm always trying to make our win now kind of moves. And it's like, oh, so you're going to trade a pick, huh? You're going to trade one of these picks in the next couple of days. He's not going to trade David Pastrnak, though. Don't worry about that, guys. Please stop believing that's ever going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Have you seen Nico Mikkola in the playoffs time?
Oh, yeah. No, he would definitely do that here. He would surely do that here. He would totally. Yeah, they'd make the playoffs, too. Trade Pastrnak and bring in Mikkola. You're definitely going to make the playoffs, so for sure. Yes. I just think that they might be a more of a trade team than a free agency team this year, given how the market is just so damn top heavy this year versus years past. And, a guy that I liked, for example, was Riley Smith, a former Bruin, resigns in Vegas. And then Brandon Saad resigns in Vegas. And you're like, okay, there are 2 guys that I thought could maybe be fits for you in your third line off the board now.
Yeah. I do feel like it's so tough to gauge, because the easy thing, right, is where they have the money and the need. It's like, oh, they're just going to throw the money at Besser, or they're going to throw the money at Ekblad. And I'd rather them give money to Ekblad. I feel like he's not the perfect player, especially, he's got a lot of mileage. But I think if, let's say, you're giving $9 million to Besser or Ekblad, which is what it's going to be, people have to get used to. There's going to be a lot of sticker shock with whoever you're signing. I could see you giving $9 million to Besser, and you're like, well, he's got 30 goal potential, but he's going to have 22 goals and 49 points, middle 6 production. And you're like, I want some more than just that. He's kind of like Minnesota Jake DeBrusk in that way, where he's a good player, but maybe not at $9.5 million. The ironic thing is Jake DeBrusk now has an unbelievable contract with Vancouver with what he's getting paid for that same type of production. Whereas if you sign Ekblad, who, is getting up there, but he's still 29 years old, I think. But what's a standard season for Ekblad? We've mentioned what Besser could give you, but if you give him $9 million to Ekblad and he gives you 20 minutes a night, 25 to 30 points, and plays a bunch of minutes and solidifies your top 4 next to Lindholm or whoever it is, your top 4. I feel like $9 million goes a little bit further there with that type of player. But it still feels like there's another shoe to drop where it's going to be a trade or something, whether it's Anderson or, do the Golden Knights move out Tomas Hertl's contract or something like that? I'm sure there's a bunch of different guys we can look at as trade targets, but it feels like that is the Bruins' top priority, is looking at a trade before getting to these bidding wars. Because one, there's no guarantee they're going to win these bidding wars. Let's say Ekblad doesn't go back to Florida. Team like Utah or Columbus, I've heard, linked to him. There's a lot of teams that'll pony up to sign a player like that. So there's also no guarantee you win that bidding war. So it does feel like trade is the first shoe to drop there. And it feels like inevitable there's going to be some sort of move like that beyond just whoever they sign on Tuesday. For those of you listening to the show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new video drops. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, with Ekblad, it's a big price to pay, but you're also not worried about your right side for at least 4 years, right? Like
Right.
his game might start to fall off a cliff when he's 33 years old or whatever, but like 6'4", skates well, offensive instincts. He's added some
tested playoff guy.
Yeah, he's added some physicality to his game as well the last few years versus when he first broke in the league. And so, you know, he takes steroids, always like that. I'm a big fan of steroid guys. Put them all in the Hall of Fame. So I kind of look at him and go, yeah, like there's risk involved, but you kind of know what you're getting for 3 or 4 years, which is what I'm kind of worried about right now, because you want to keep David Pastrnak happy and you want to keep Charlie McAvoy upright. And, you know, they're kind of in the prime of their careers, those two guys. And so I don't think you're as far away as people will say. And I clearly think that you want to win right now. And so you make some moves to get you there. It might not pay off in year 1 or year 2, but you hope by year 3, all right, you got a full assortment here of weaponry around your core pieces and you're off to the races. And so I just think right shot D, like it's an organizational need. And you have Charlie McAvoy, but Andrew Peake's a pending free agent. Do you want to pay him, you know, what guys like him tend to cost and how their bodies age? Or do you want to sign Aaron Ekblad now and be like, all right, we're good for 4 years? You know, like that's a good little window to have there in terms of knowing what you have on your right side.
Yeah. And I also feel like the Bruins do have to, beyond the fact that I think they want to make a move, I also feel like where the cap is jumping up, like you should still try to commit some money right now, because whoever you sign, if it's like Ekblad, barring him just catastrophically playing like shit or injury, like the $9 million in like 2 years all of a sudden becomes like $6 million.
Yeah.
Right. Like same with like you're taking on a contract of a player like I'll just say Hurdle, right? If they have to move that money out and he's like 31, he hasn't maybe been like the point per game guy that they thought he was going to be, but still a productive player. He's got making what, 8.1 million for the next 40 years. Well, that's all of a sudden going to be like a $5 million contract by like 2027. Right. So
yeah,
it's almost like, I feel like, I'm not saying the Bruins should spend to the cap, right? Where I think you still want to keep some of that flexibility, but also signing a guy to a big contract might give you some sticker shock right now. But look at the dynamics of the cap the next couple of years. Like now is the time to lock in as many guys as you can. Look at what Florida's like. Florida's probably going to win a cup again next year because they've got everyone locked up and they're cooking. Like they don't have to worry about this. They've got their big pieces and they can kind of find the flyer, the veteran guys or the guys they can sign for cheap and fill out their roster, but they're good to go. It's like, if you're the Bruins, if you're able to sign Ekblad and have him locked up and your top 4 is all set, and you bring in a guy like Hurdle or something that can be a top 6 centerman for the next couple of years until Hagens is ready. The more money you commit now to guys that you think can succeed, I think all these contracts are going to age better. I mean, hell, like Charlie McAvoy is making $9.5 million, and wait till you see what Kale McCarr's next contract is going to be. Like, you're in a spot now where I think you have to be aggressive this offseason, not just for the sake of adding the talent because you want to be competitive, but also like trying to cover as many bases before the money gets really silly in a couple of years. They're already going to get silly, but now's the time to lock in players if you think they can really help you out for the next couple of years.
And the element here, Connor, as well, that I think you're alluding to is that when you do bring in James Hagens, okay, you're going to have 3 years of him making $925. Yep. That is the cheat code, right? Like that is the cheat code. If you have a core in place and then you can introduce an entry-level contract or an affordable young high-end player contract, that is the game changer. That is how, teams are able to win Stanley Cups. Why do you think that the Chicago Blackhawks were able to amass the talent they had around Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews? Like those guys were on affordable contracts and they could bring in Marian Hossa and they could bring in the veterans that allow them to get over the hump. Like it's the same thing kind of, like it's not totally comparable, but like Edmonton, right? Like they feel the crunch every year they don't win because they are 1 year closer to having to pay everybody more money. And now that's Evan Bouchard. Before it was Leon Draisaitl. Now it's Bouchard. Next year it's Connor McDavid. Like, they are looking at it going, oh my God, every year that goes by is 1 year closer to these guys making more money, which
they
makes
may not
it
be
harder.
able to sign. They may not be able to sign Corey Perry. I saw that. I'm like, Corey Perry, like, how much money is he making?
Right. Like, I think $1.5 million. I want to say something like that.
Like if they can't sign those guys, like who are they signed to fill out their roster?
It's crazy, dude. It's absolutely crazy. But that's the crunch you have in the NHL. It's like the NBA. Like you can do the load up, but then the second apron is going to make you trade off guys. In the NHL, it's the hard cap, and it's it's your young players going from making under $1 million to making 10 million. Or going from making 8 million to 15. Like the way it just keeps jumping up levels. You're like, that's 2 third liners. That's a good fourth D and a great second liner. Like it's that part of the puzzle is getting harder and harder. So if you have younger players that you can integrate while you still have the stars making the big money in the prime of their careers and making big money, but not top of the market money, like that's the sweet spot, right? And the Bruins, I think, want to be there in like 2 years. So you got to accrue and acquire more talent between now and those 2 years from now, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, even like look at contracts that aren't right now people are thrilled about. Well, let's say in 2 years you got Hagens up here and he's looking like the real deal, and you got Elias Lindholm as a 3C making at what his money is in 2 years is like 5 million, 4.5 million, essentially what he would be getting paid. And he didn't have a perfect year, but that's pretty good value for a guy like that. If you got him and like Hurdle, who's making the equivalent of 6.125 at that point 2 years down the road, and that's your 3 guys down the middle, yeah, you're pretty good. Maybe not like long term of what Hurdle and Lindholm are, but as long as you got Hagens and those guys playing where their spots are, you're in a good spot, and you can try to find that other center down the road. You don't have to deal with the Bergeron Krejci 2-headed monster. We got to find 2 franchise centers. We got Hagens. Now we just got a few years to figure out who we slot in behind him. So I do think it's going to be critical. I don't know who the Bruins are going to get. We'll react later on this week, but I think you have to find talent now and have them signed to give you the ability to have these players that can be foundational guys, not just for right now, but for the next couple of years, because I think those contracts will continue to age well. So I think that's going to be key for this team. Any predictions of who you think they're going to get, like a name or two that you think is going to be on this team by the end of the week?
Yeah, screw it. I'll say they get Brock Besser. I think they realize that they need a second line winger. The market doesn't have a ton of them available. Ryan Donato stays in Chicago. Matt Duchene stays in Dallas. The guys that I mentioned earlier stay in Vegas. And so I think they realize, we might not love this guy. We might not love his consistency, but we desperately need another second line, winger. And I don't think Brad's coming back. So Brock Besser might be the best the Bruins can do on that front. What'd you make of that? By the way, before we go, that Pierre LeBrun report that the Bruins want to meet with Marchand.
I will say it would be extremely funny if Brad just comes back on like a really cheap deal. But like the reason he left was that he wants to get paid, and he sure validated the fact that he deserves a big contract. So barring him just wanting to come back here and settling for less, which like he's earned the right to cash in after taking multiple below value deals. Listen, it would be hysterical if on Tuesday we get a little Brad Marchand gif of him doing the winky face, and he signs like a 4-year by $1 million contract because he just wants to come back to Boston. That ain't happening though. And nor do I think the Bruins, who are on the right track in terms of building a sustainable kind of group, like, listen, love Brad Marchand. Awesome guy, awesome player, still plays at a high level. The Bruins, who need to be embracing like the future, shouldn't be giving that guy 4x8, right?
Right.
If he wants to come back for cheaper, if he wants to come back for $3 million and he's a middle 6 player, which is what he should be, sure. Like I would take that, but I don't see Brad doing that. Nor do I want him to like do that for the sake of, unless he just wants to really be up here. Like, I want that dude to also get the bag after taking the kind of contracts he has. So barring there being I think, major concession on Marchand's side of things, I don't want the Bruins to be the team that gives him the 4x32 or something like that. Like, that's not right now what this team needs to be looking at, I would say.
Yeah, it's so tough, right? Because like there is the nostalgia element of Brad Marchand, and he's still an effective player, clearly. is he playing third line for you? Or is he playing second line for you? Because that's a big difference, right? Do you have Alexander Barkov and Sam Reinhart? No, you don't. So, I struggle with the idea of the plug and play. He's going to be the same player that he was for the Florida Panthers for you, because the situations are different. The teams are different. And so there's that part of it. I do think that, to your point, like there's an element here of wanting to is too strong. But you look at sort of the benefits of moving on and allowing McAvoy and Pasternak and those guys to grow into your next wave of leaders. Can they ever do that if they are acquiescing to the only two?
Oh, your mic cut out for a second there.
Sorry,
there you go.
I was just saying, like, can they ever be that if they are acquiescing to the only guy who is a Stanley Cup champion, like in that locker room? Like. I don't know. Like, I do think that there's enough there to say that you want to move on, but also the free agent market, as we've talked about, kind of thin. So if you want help now, like he might be and Besser says he wants to go home to Minnesota or go to Philly and reunite with Rick Tocchet. Like, that's kind of hard for you to, find another option that's as good as Brad Marchand.
Yeah. It's just, I feel like the ideal scenario there is like, again, you would have to have him be like a middle six player. It's like, hey, if you want to take the two Florida and Toronto picks and loop in a bunch of other draft capital and get Jason Robertson, and it's like Robertson, Geeky, and then Marchand, that would be great. But one, I don't think Marchand wants to be like, I don't know if Marchand wouldn't want to be that kind of role player here, but like, are you also signing him to like a steep contract to be that type of player, right? Like the perfect scenario is the Bruins have depth on the left wing and Marchand comes back on a cheaper deal to be your middle six cheat code. But that's fantasy land. That's the ideal scenario that probably isn't happening, right? Like, I don't want the Bruins to give him $8 million a year to be a top line player when that's not what he should be at this stage of his career. You saw how effective he is when he's in more of a middle six role, and he'd be great in that role here, but who's it going to be? Who's going to be in that spot? Nor are you giving all that money to him. So I'd love for him to come back. It'd be great if he came back on an affordable deal, but that seems to be counterintuitive to the reason why he ended up being in Florida in the first place, is wanting to get a final major contract, and he certainly earned it after what he did in Florida. So barring it being a major change of what his priorities are, or it's like, hey, I could get paid in Toronto, but like screw that, which like he would be a fantastic fit in Toronto. So that would be catastrophic for Bruins fans. But I can't see it happening barring him making, I think, some major concessions.
Yeah. And, there's clearly some sort of, I don't want to say resentment. That's far too strong. And listen, we're not in the room enough to know. But, are the Bruins going to get a deal on him given the way that things ended? Probably not. Right. Like, Brad's a prideful guy. And that's what's made him such an elite player and a guy that you want on your team and a guy you hate going to war against. But like, is he suddenly going to say, yeah, no, I want, after you guys didn't want to compromise, I want to compromise with you again. Like, I don't know, like it just feels too messy for that to be what happens on July 1. As fun as it would be, as much as he would fill a need for the Bruins, because the Bruins do still need middle six talent. It's just, I just find it really hard to see happening. I don't know why, but then again, we recorded the podcast all year long, and from camp to the deadline, I said I'd be surprised if Brad gets traded unless he wants a trade. He wanted to re-sign and he was traded. So my instincts on this have been wrong all year long. So maybe they're wrong again. Who knows?
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's like there's like a 10% chance of that happening, of like the little winky face, and all of a sudden he signs a deal. We're like, I can't believe he did that. But who knows? Who knows what goes on behind the scenes? Like the same thing with like the Krejci over in the Czech league, where it felt like that was maybe a little bit messy, and then Cassidy's not there, and it all falls back into place and feels like that was mapped out months in advance. So who knows? I feel like you get back into like the conspiracy theorists, like leaning into more of just like what you hope happens as opposed to what is the reality in some of those situations. So it's almost like we should just maybe wait until Tuesday to see what happens. But it does feel like there's going to be a lot to process this week, going, whether it's dev camp, trades, all that stuff, starting on Tuesday, especially. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Well, you can catch me on 98.5 The Sports Hub. I'll actually be co-hosting with Mark Bertrand on July 1. So we'll have live reaction to any signings the Bruins make that day when free agency opens at 12 p.m. We'll probably have some news trickling in before then, as is tradition. You can also find me at 98.5thesportshub.com and on the Sports Hub Underground podcast as well that I co-host with Matt Dolph, and social media. You can just search my name, type me in. You'll find me looking like an idiot, talking like an idiot, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's an idiot. So that's me. How about yourself?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins offseason going into the 2025-26 season. I'm also the 26-27 season. We are not jumping ahead a year. It's still going to be a pretty interesting year. But you can read all of my stuff over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. You can also follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at ConorRyan_93. Ty, thank you once again for talking hockey with us, and for all the fans listening in. Again, if you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel. We have pretty much daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat, Pucks with Hags, all that good stuff. So please subscribe, get notifications over at YouTube. And if you don't want to do that, you can also subscribe to us over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your hockey podcasts. Also want to shout out once again PrizePicks, North America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download today and use code CLNS to get $50 when you play just $5. Again, this was episode 342 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.